A very good morning to you once again, coming to you live from the mother city that is still quite dark, almost 7 o'clock and not a light in sight. But I'm sure it will lighten up very, very soon as we continue with our broadcast from the Cape Town International Convention Centre, speaking about the involvement of women in science, both as researchers and as respondents. I'm joined now by someone who's the mind behind this particular Gender Summit. I'm joined by Dr. Elizabeth Pollitzer. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. That is really very important. We are so excited to have a Gender Summit here in Cape Town to host it, which is such a wonderful city.
Doctor, you came up with this initiative to have this Gender Summit. Why?
Well, I used to work at Imperial College, okay, so I could see it's a college, part of London University, and it's very much technology-based and science-based. And there were not many women there, and there was not much thinking about how gender issues impact on science. And then we had a project. We brought together science leaders who have never talked about gender before. And we put in front of them research evidence. And it came from different areas, from medicine, from transport, from energy and so on. And that's where scientists looked at the situation about women. And that this research evidence we felt was so persuasive. So we asked science leaders to look at that and say what they think about it. And after 3 months of deliberations and asking gender scholars various questions, because they had to understand what it really gender meant, we asked it, the question was, does it matter to science? Because obviously it mattered to women. If women were excluded from research as researchers, as subject of research, and as beneficiaries of research, then science produced knowledge that had more evidence for men than for women. And that means that the outcomes are often better for men than for women. Very few people know that women have a 47% higher risk of injury in a car crash than men. And the reason is that women's bodies are different. They are smaller, they have less muscles around the neck. And when you have a car crash, first the car goes into a barrier, then your body inside goes into the car, and then your brain inside the skull goes into your skull. And this is a very serious thing for women. And the cars are only tested on male crash test dummies. There are no female crash test dummies. And when you have research labs that are populated by men, everything is tested on men. Okay? So there was a software for voice recognition issued some years ago. It didn't work for women because the acoustics labs were full of men. So it was tested on men. It worked for men. So great, And there are many, many examples like this. But they are very important to understand where these differences are coming from and which ones are important, because obviously sometimes women and men are pretty much similar. So we need to understand that. And this is objective of the Gender Summit, to bring scientists, to bring gender scholars, and to bring policymakers to look at the research evidence and decide together what does it mean, where improvements are needed, and so on. And very often, so we are very pleased this summit now came to Africa, yes? Because when we have gender summits, we concentrate on women and men, okay? That's hard enough. And it's also because it's a very European kind of a perspective. But we have learned when a summit moved to North America that really what works in Europe will not work in other regions. Each region has to develop its own strategy for addressing gender issues. And at each summit now, someone will get up, actually quite a few people will get up and say, what about, race? What about ethnicity? What about all those other things? We just talk about women and men.
And poverty alleviation, as is the theme this time around. But, Doctor, sometimes the danger of such summits is that they end up being talk shops, that it's a gathering of minds, like-minded people, thrashing out issues, very concerned. You go home and nothing happens. How do we make sure that this brings about the desired change on the ground?
Right, completely agree. Yes, Gender Summit is not just a conference. Gender Summit is a movement, okay? Because we're creating a community of experts and practitioners and institutions. It is led by important science institutions to start with. So they make that commitment to show that these are very important issues. And we can now have a community of about 6,000 experts. Yes, we're talking here top scientists, all right? and people who are in the community and top policymakers. And it has worked in Europe, because the Horizon 2020, which is Europe's biggest research program, 80 billion euros for the next 7 years, actually now for the first time in history includes gender as a criterion of success.
So there has been some evidence on the ground that this is more than just deliberations. And I love that it's in Africa for the very first time, and it is going to be tackling some of the social ills that we have in the country. So it's basically a coming together of physical science and social sciences with the aim of finding solutions to African problems right here in Africa. All right, let's leave it there, Elise, for now. I'm sure you can tell I'm extremely excited about this. More from our guests a little bit later. Stay